Teacher is the part of important in learning process. Besides on that, what about student? Student is needed. Without student, teacher unknown he or she as a teacher have a good teaching or not. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Kris Inayah with NIM 20530021. Now, I want to give you a short explanation as my final examination with the title Characteristic of Good EFL Teacher by EFL Student Perception. For the first is, what is good EFL teacher? What is the definition good EFL teacher by student perception? Okay, you can call good teacher while the teacher has good communication. Teacher can communicate intents with students, and in this condition, students show that they are enthusiastic with your material, your assignment in the classroom or in learning process. And the second is care for learning in the classroom. Care for student learning. Teacher not only asks the student like, any questions so far or any difficulties for this material? Not only about that, but teacher also can care for the student learning out the class. Like you can ask your student intents, like you have difficulties for this, maybe you have difficulty for this material, you can call me or you can go to my room, something like that. A very intense and informal. And the third is student motivation. Motivation is the very important in learning process. You can give your student motivation every day, every time, because based on motivation or from the motivation, student can changing better than before. Like you can say for a student, you can do it. You can do it because you have a passion. You can do it because you have a dream. Something like that. So motivation is more crucial and you can give for your student every time. Okay, the second explanation is about research question in study. When you know and when you understand about definition of good EFL teacher, so what is the characteristic of good EFL teacher by EFL student perception? Okay, next is about objective of study in this research. Based on student perception, you know the characteristic of the EFL teacher, so the teacher should be aware of their personal characteristic. Why the personal characteristic? Because in this study, finding that personal characteristic more important in learning process by student perception. After that, quality of the student-teacher relationship is showing will be better, like better quality for teacher and student relationship after you know, understand about the characteristic of the FL teacher by student perception. And next, scope and limitation in the study. Scope and limitation in the study is explained about the FL teacher by student perception, but not discussed about the implementation of good EFL teacher by student perception. And the next is about literature review. There are 2 points, theoretical framework and previous relevant study. For the theoretical framework, there are 2 parts. For the first is definition of good EFL teacher, and The second is characteristic of good EFL teacher by EFL student perception. Okay, in this part before, I have explained for you about definition of good EFL teacher, like when the teacher have a good communication, care for the learning student, and always give the student motivation. And the second is characteristic. In the study, I just want to explain two characteristics for the good TFL teacher. For the first is responsive what students needed, and in this context is focused on motivation. Responsive what student needed is motivation. Motivation is the best things that can change the student's life, the student's learning, more successfully student from the motivation, everyday motivation. I know that the best motivation is from himself, but why not you as a teacher have important roles in your student? Why not you give me your students? You can always say you can do it in every day, every time. And the second is tolerant with student mistakes. I think not all of teachers have this skill. Like I know that more professional teacher always say that the successful teacher or the professional teacher is when she has a good pedagogical skill, but I think no. You can understand what a student want to do. You always with your student when student need it, and you don't angry where when the student do the mistakes. And the second is about reviews related study. Okay, in this study I will get the point from the research of research by Sakir and et al. That characteristic of good EFL teacher by perception from Indonesian EFL student perception is that characteristic of good teacher can be classified into three categories: personality competence, social competence, professional competence. Then student rate personality competence is as the most important role compared to pedagogical competence. And the next is about significance of the study. For the first, fourth teacher, these teachers can be used as an evaluation on the characteristic of good EFL teacher based on EFL student perception. And the second, for the students, these teachers can make EFL student perception, or this research can make EFL student perception more detailed, like student can understand the characteristic of good EFL teacher. And the last, for the researcher, this research can be a reference to other research which have a similar topic. Okay, and the next part is about research method. For the first, in this study, use narrative inquiry approach, and the data is the FL student perception as a source of data, and characteristic of good EFL teacher as a data. And for the technique of data collection, use observation, documentation, and structure interview. Okay, for the narrative analysis, there are some steps. Okay, one is determining the topic discussed in the study, the character of good FL teacher, which focus on two characters. Conducting interviews by making the interviewers comfortable in expressing their opinions and preventing the informants from leaving the topic being discussed. And the third, making short notes and record the speaker's voice, comparing the opinions of the search in order to get an accurate result. And the last is making conclusion from the information provided by the research person. To validate the data, the study used triangulation of source data. Step 1 is observation, step 2 is documentation, and the last is non-structured interview. Okay, I think that's all from me. So when I have a mistake, so I do apologize. And the last, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.